The late afternoon sun, the color of warm honey, spilled across the manicured lawns of Havenwood. It wasn't just a housing development, it was the culmination of a long search, a carefully chosen sanctuary. Liam and his wife Olivia had finally claimed as their own. From their wide porch swing, the sounds of the community blended into a comforting symphony. The distant, cheerful shrieks of children echoing from the gleaming playground equipment, the rhythmic thwack of tennis balls from the courts down the street, the low buzz of neighbors chatting over fences. This was exactly what they had envisioned, a peaceful neighborhood pulsing with life. Liam leaned back, a contented sigh escaping him, as he watched their 10-year-old son Noah trot off the pristine baseball diamond at the edge of the expansive community green Liam had just finished pitching to him. The familiar feel of the worn baseball glove, a small anchor in his busy life as an architect. The field, like everything in Havenwood, was meticulously maintained. Chalk lines, sharp grass, impossibly green. It was one of the key selling points, a place where impromptu games could spring up, where fathers and sons could forge memories under wide suburban skies. Seeing Noah's grin flushed with the effort of hitting a line drive made the hefty monthly HOA dues feel like a reasonable investment in happiness. Olivia came out handing Liam a glass of iced tea, the condensation tracing patterns on the glass. "He's getting better," she said, her eyes following Noah as he joined a group of friends near the sprawling oak tree that marked center field. "That last hit was impressive." "He listens," Liam smiled. Most of the time, they sat in comfortable silence for a moment, simply absorbing the atmosphere. This wasn't just about the house, a spacious colonial they had already filled with warmth and laughter. It was about the feel of Havenwood. It was the walking trails that snaked through pockets of preserved woodland, the sparkling community pool that was a hub of activity all summer, the undeniable sense of safety and shared purpose. It was the kind of place where you knew your neighbors, where block parties weren't a quaint relic of the past, but a planned summer event. Finding sanctuary like this, a true dream home environment in the competitive Northern Virginia sprawl, felt like winning some kind of lottery. Of course, paradise had its price tag. The Havenwood Homeowners Association fees weren't insignificant, a fact. Liam acknowledged with a mental shrug each month when the automatic payment went through. But the results were undeniable. The landscaping was immaculate, the shared facilities gleamed, and there was a pervasive sense of order. The HOA was just there. A necessary, mostly invisible engine running quietly in the background, ensuring the gears of their perfect family community kept turning smoothly. It was part of the package, the administrative underpinning of their peaceful lives, hardly worth a second thought, amidst the daily joys of raising Noah in a place that truly felt like home. For now, contentment reigned serene and undisturbed. The vibrant bloom of summer in Havenwood began to fade into the crisp golds and reds of autumn, about 6 months after Liam and Olivia had fully settled into their rhythm. Life continued its pleasant course, yet small, almost imperceptible shifts began to ripple through the community fabric. It started subtly, a sharply worded reminder tucked under windshield wipers about parking exactly within the lines, even on their own driveways. Then came the almost militant enforcement of the trash can retrieval time. A neighbor received a formal warning letter because their bins were still curbside, an hour past the newly mandated 9 a.m. deadline on pickup day. Liam noticed it first with the landscaping. The cheerful bursts of colorful perennials that had softened the edges of the common areas were replaced with severe geometric arrangements of evergreen shrubs and meticulously ordered mulch beds. It was undeniably neat, tidy even, but it felt sterile, less like a welcoming neighborhood green and more like the grounds of a corporate park. "New board finding their aesthetic, I guess," he remarked to Olivia one Saturday morning, gesturing towards the rigidly pruned boxwoods lining the community entrance. It was later that same day, while walking back from the park with Noah, that Liam saw her for the first time, or at least the first time he truly noticed her. An older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, stood near the newly redesigned entrance sign. Her posture ramrod straight, her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes behind sharp eyeglasses scanned the street with an unnervingly critical gaze. She was speaking to one of the landscaping crew members, not in conversation, but seemingly issuing directives, her gestures clipped and precise. There was an air of unquestionable authority about her, yet devoid of warmth. Liam vaguely recalled hearing about a recent HOA board election, one he, like many busy parents, hadn't paid much attention to. He assumed this must be one of the new members, maybe even the president. "A bit intense," Liam murmured to himself, quickening his pace slightly. He wasn't looking for trouble. These were minor things, really. Overzealous rule enforcement, questionable taste in shrubbery, hardly worth getting worked up about. Every HOA had its quirks, its periods of adjustment. He figured things would settle down. It was easier to focus on Noah's upcoming soccer tournament and the project deadlines piling up at work than to dwell on these small dissonances in their otherwise perfect sanctuary. He brushed off the faint chill of unease, attributing it to the changing season, rather than anything more significant. It was a Tuesday afternoon, crisp and clear, the kind perfect for shaking off the workday blues with an hour of baseball practice. Liam had promised Noah they'd work on his swing before dinner, a ritual both cherished. As they approached the edge of the community green, baseball gear slung over their shoulders, something felt immediately wrong. Instead of the welcoming expanse of the field, they were greeted by stark white signs, zip-tied to the chain-link backstop. And more jarringly, a heavy chain looped through the entrance gate, secured with a brand-new industrial-looking padlock. "What's this?" Noah asked, his voice laced with confusion. He ran ahead, peering through the diamond mesh of the fence. Liam followed his steps, slowing as he read the block letters printed on the signs. "Field closed until further notice, by order of the Havenwood HOA Board. No trespassing." Closed, but why? Noah looked up at his dad, his earlier excitement visibly deflating. "We have practice tomorrow, Dad. The whole team." The devastation in his son's eyes struck Liam harder than he expected. This field wasn't just grass and dirt. It was a cornerstone of Noah's social life, his athletic pursuits, a tangible piece of the Havenwood promise. Liam frowned, shaking the heavy chain instinctively. It didn't budge. This wasn't a temporary measure for maintenance. It felt abrupt, final. He scanned the field. It looked perfect as always, no obvious reason for a sudden closure. An unsettling feeling, a progression from the minor annoyances of recent weeks, began to stir in his gut. This wasn't just about landscaping preferences anymore. Back home, while Noah listlessly poked at his homework, Liam called the HOA management office number listed on their website. After navigating a frustrating automated menu, he finally reached an administrative assistant whose voice conveyed a practiced, weary indifference. "Yes, Havenwood, HOA, how can I help you?" "Hi, my name is Liam Hayes. I live at 12 Willow Creek Drive. I'm calling about the baseball field. It's chained shut and there are signs up." "Yes, the board voted to close the field temporarily due to insurance liability concerns," the voice recited, devoid of inflection. "Liability concerns. What concerns specifically? Has something happened?" Liam pressed, trying to keep the edge out of his voice. "The board is reviewing the community's insurance policy and assessing potential risks associated with the field's usage. It's a liability issue. But liability is incredibly vague. Can you tell me what the specific risk is? And when will it reopen? My son's team has practice scheduled." "Sir, all I can tell you is that the board is addressing liability concerns. Information regarding reopening will be communicated when a decision is made." "Is there anything else?" Liam felt his grip tighten on the phone. It was like talking to a brick wall, a masterclass in bureaucratic doublespeak. He hung up, a knot of frustration tightening in his chest. Looking out the window towards the now forbidden field, the glint of the padlock seemed to mock him. It wasn't just a locked gate anymore. It felt personal. An arbitrary restriction slammed down on his family's life. A sudden crack in the foundation of their carefully chosen sanctuary. Disbelief was rapidly giving way to a simmering anger. The frustration over the baseball field lingered through the week, casting a small shadow over the usually bright Havenwood atmosphere. Hoping to shake off the mood and enjoy one of the remaining mild autumn weekends, Liam suggested to Olivia that they hit the tennis courts on Saturday morning. They hadn't played in a few weeks, but the pristine courts were another amenity. They valued a place for friendly exercise, just a short walk from their door. Rackets in hand, they ambled down the path, anticipating a casual hour of volleys. As they approached the gate, however, a figure stepped out from beside the shaded bench near the entrance. A security guard in a crisp, unfamiliar uniform. He held up a hand, polite but firm. "Good morning. Do you folks have a reservation for the court?" Liam exchanged a surprised glance with Olivia. "A reservation? We've lived here for months. We've never needed one before." "New policy effective this week, sir," the guard replied, consulting a clipboard. "All court usage must be pre-booked through the HOA portal. Additionally," he paused, looking them up and down almost assessingly, "are you both certified?" "Certified?" Olivia asked, bewildered. Certified for what? Playing tennis. The guard nodded gravely. Yes, ma'am. Due to ongoing liability assessments, the board has implemented a mandatory tennis certification program. Residents wishing to use the courts must demonstrate proficiency and knowledge of proper court etiquette. There's an application process. Liam felt a surge of incredulity. You're kidding, right? We have to be certified to hit a tennis ball. Around on courts we pay fees to maintain. Those are the new regulations, sir, the guard said, his tone unwavering. Once you complete the certification, there's a $50 processing fee per person. You'll be issued an access code for the reservation system. $50 each, just to use the courts they already paid for. Liam stared at the guard, then at the empty, inviting courts behind him. This was beyond ridiculous. It felt intentionally obstructive. He started to argue, pointing out the absurdity, but the guard remained impassive, simply repeating the new rules like a mantra. There was no reasoning with him. Defeated and simmering with a fresh wave of anger, Liam and Olivia turned away their rackets, suddenly feeling heavy and useless. The final insult came later that afternoon. Walking past the courts on their way back from a grocery run, Liam noticed something new. Heavy chains identical to the one on the baseball field gate were now looped through the handles of the tennis court entrances. Padlocks glinted in the afternoon sun. They hadn't just implemented prohibitive rules, they'd physically locked residents out. Liam stopped dead in his tracks, clenching his fists. This wasn't random. This wasn't just overzealous bureaucracy. The field, now the courts. It was a deliberate pattern, a systematic dismantling of the very amenities that made Havenwood desirable. The vague liability excuse felt thinner than ever. His frustration wasn't just simmering anymore. It was boiling over into cold, hard anger. Someone was actively trying to wall off parts of their community, and he was starting to feel the need to do more than just complain. He needed to understand why. Liam spent the rest of Saturday stewing. The image of the padlocked courts burned into his mind. The feeling of helplessness gnawed at him. By Sunday morning, passive anger had curdled into a need for action. He started texting, reaching out to neighbors he knew had kids on Noah's baseball team. Others he'd chatted with casually at the pool over the summer. Hey, Mark, did you see? They locked up the baseball field. Any idea what's going on? Followed by Sarah P. Saw you guys play tennis sometimes? Did you hear about the new certification nonsense and the locks? The responses flooded back almost immediately, a digital chorus of frustration and disbelief. It's insane. My kids are heartbroken about the field. Certification 50? Are they serious? Got turned away from the courts yesterday. Security guard treated us like criminals. My wife got a warning for leaving the recycling bin out 30 mins too long. Something weird is happening. It quickly became clear Liam wasn't alone in his frustration. The unease was widespread, touching nearly everyone who actively used the community's defining features. Feeling a surge of validation, Liam sent out another message. Seems like a lot of us are confused and upset. Anyone free to swing by my place around 3 p.m.? Maybe we can figure out what's happening together. By 3 o'clock, Liam and Olivia's living room was surprisingly full. Mark, whose son played catcher on Noah's team, stood venting near the fireplace. Sarah Peterson, a friendly mom Liam knew from the playground, perched on the arm of the sofa, recounting her tennis court rejection. Others chimed in, tales of newly aggressive security patrols, nitpicky rule enforcement, and a general feeling of being squeezed out of the spaces they paid to enjoy. The air crackled with shared indignation, a collective sense that something fundamental about Havenwood was being eroded. Amidst the concerned chatter, Chloe Wexler arrived. She lived a few doors down. A sharp, articulate woman Liam knew was a lawyer, though they hadn't spoken much beyond brief greetings. She listened intently for several minutes, her expression thoughtful as various neighbors shared their grievances. When there was a lull, she spoke, her voice calm but carrying weight. I understand everyone's frustration, Chloe began, and frankly, I share it. But based on what I'm hearing and what I remember from reviewing the HOA documents when I bought my place, the board might be seriously overstepping. The room quieted. What do you mean? Liam asked. Our Havenwood bylaws are pretty specific, Chloe continued, leaning forward slightly. Major changes to community amenity access, like completely closing a field or implementing significant restrictions and fees for courts, typically require a community-wide vote, not just a unilateral board decision. And, she added, holding up a hand as murmurs started, There are usually clear rules about meeting schedules, needing to be reasonably accessible for working residents. Holding decision-making meetings at, say, 1 p.m. on a weekday might not meet that standard. A bombshell had dropped. The scattered whispers of discontent suddenly coalesced into something more focused. They weren't just dealing with unreasonable policies, they might be dealing with illegal ones. A palpable shift occurred in the room. Helpless anger began to morph into determined resolve. Liam looked around at the faces of his neighbors, seeing a new spark of shared purpose ignite. Maybe they could fight this. And in Chloe Wexler, they might just have found their most crucial ally. Fueled by Chloe Wexler's insights, the impromptu gathering at Liam's house transformed into a focused working session. Over the next few days, emails flew back and forth, guided by Chloe, who pinpointed the relevant sections in the dense HOA governing documents. They drafted a formal letter. It was polite but firm, clearly outlining the bylaws regarding community voting for amenity changes and accessible meeting times. It detailed the recent closures and restrictions, highlighting the negative impact on families, and formally requested the immediate reopening of the baseball field and tennis courts, along with clarification on the board's decision-making process. Liam felt a surge of cautious optimism as the list of signatories grew. 28 households added their names, a significant block of concerned residents demanding answers. Liam volunteered to deliver it. He printed the letter on quality paper, the weight of the signatures feeling substantial in his hand. He decided against simply mailing it. This deserved a direct delivery. He walked to the small official-looking HOA management office tucked away near the community clubhouse during his lunch break. The same indifferent administrative assistant from his previous phone call accepted the envelope with barely a glance, placing it on a pile of mail. Liam emphasized its importance, stating it was a formal letter to the board president Eleanor Vance from multiple residents. The assistant merely nodded her expression. Unchanging, he didn't have to wait long for a response. Later that evening, as Liam was helping Noah with his math homework, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He answered, and a crisp, commanding voice immediately spoke. "Mr. Hayes, this is Eleanor Vance, president of the Havenwood HOA board." "Yes, Ms. Vance." "Thank you for calling," Liam replied, trying to keep his tone neutral and professional. "I received your petition," she began, the word dripping with faint condescension. "While the board appreciates residents taking an interest, I must inform you that your interpretation of the bylaws is mistaken. The board acted well within its authority to protect the community from significant liability." Liability regarding what exactly? Liam pressed the memory of his previous stonewalling fresh. "And the bylaws concerning community votes, the specifics of insurance negotiations and risk assessments are confidential, board matters, Mr. Hayes." Eleanor cut him off sharply. "Furthermore, there have been several unreported incidents and near-miss injuries on the field in recent years. We simply cannot expose the association, and by extension all homeowners, to potentially ruinous lawsuits due to negligence." Liam blinked. Injuries. He'd lived here for months, talked to countless parents. He'd never heard a whisper of any serious incidents on the field. It sounded utterly fabricated. "I haven't heard of any injuries, Ms. Vance, and surely any vote requirement?" "The board's counsel has affirmed our position," she stated flatly, steamrolling his attempt to speak. "The facilities will remain closed until our review is complete and appropriate safety measures, potentially including permanent restrictions, are implemented. Frankly, Mr. Hayes, the board finds it counterproductive when residents attempt to interfere with necessary governance based on incomplete information." "Good evening." The line clicked dead before Liam could utter another word. He stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, stunned by the cold finality, the blatant dismissal, and the almost certain lies about injuries. The arrogance was breathtaking. Any lingering hope that this was just a misunderstanding, a bureaucratic tangle that could be smoothed out with reason, evaporated completely. This wasn't about liability, it was about control. Eleanor Vance wasn't going to listen to reason or bylaws. Diplomacy had failed spectacularly. A cold resolve settled over Liam. If they wouldn't play by the rules, he'd have to find another way. The next official HOA board meeting was scheduled inconveniently for a Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m. in the small community clubhouse meeting room. But this time apathy was not an option. Liam, Chloe, and a handful of others had spent the past week coordinating via email and quick driveway chats. The message was simple: show up, be seen, be heard. People rearranged work schedules, took late lunches, or used personal time. The goal wasn't just to attend, it was to make a statement. Liam arrived 15 minutes early, finding the usually quiet clubhouse already buzzing. Parking was scarce. Inside the small meeting room, typically occupied by a handful of retirees, was rapidly filling. Parents stood along the back wall, families squeezed into chairs, their expressions a mixture of frustration and grim determination. Liam saw Mark from the baseball team give him a resolute nod. Sarah Peterson waved briefly before turning back to chat with another concerned mother. Chloe Wexler arrived carrying a slim portfolio, her demeanor calm and professional. The sheer number of people packed into the space created a tangible energy, a silent solidarity that felt powerful. Right at 1 p.m. The side door opened, and the 5 board members filed in. Eleanor Vance led the way, her usual air of crisp control, faltering slightly as she visibly registered the size and mood of the crowd. A flicker of surprise, perhaps annoyance, crossed her face before settling back into a mask of stern composure. Liam watched Marcus Thorne, the treasurer, trail behind her. Thorne avoided eye contact with the audience, looking distinctly uncomfortable as he took his seat at the long table facing the residents. The other board members seemed similarly taken aback by the unprecedented turnout. The meeting began with tedious procedural matters, minutes approved, treasurer's report read by a flustered Marcus Thorne. The tension in the room was palpable, a low hum beneath the surface of bureaucratic routine. Then came the open comment section. One after another, residents stood up. Mark spoke first, his voice thick with emotion. "My son lives for baseball season. That field isn't just an amenity. Ms. Vance, it's where these kids build friendships, learn teamwork." Closing it without reason or warning is devastating. What liability suddenly appeared after decades of safe use? Sarah Peterson followed. "This tennis certification, it's insulting. A $50 fee on top of our dues, padlocking the courts. Are we residents or inmates? We pay for these facilities." Another parent detailed how the heavy-handed security presence made her teenage daughter feel unwelcome just walking near the common areas. The complaints were specific, heartfelt, and echoed the sentiments of nearly everyone present. Throughout it all, Eleanor Vance sat stiffly occasionally, making a note, her expression unreadable but radiating disapproval. Finally, Liam stood up. The room quieted slightly. He felt a tremor of nerves but anchored himself by looking at the determined faces around him. "Ms. Vance," he began, his voice steady, addressing the board president directly. "You told me on the phone that the closures were due to significant liability and unreported injuries. Many of us here have lived in Havenwood for years, myself included now, and we've heard nothing of these supposed serious incidents. We formally requested clarification and received none." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "We, the residents whose fees fund this association and its insurance, deserve transparency. Will you please provide this community right now with the specific insurance quotes, the risk assessment reports, or the documented legal opinions that supposedly justify locking us out of our own facilities?" All eyes turned to Eleanor. She stared back at Liam, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice dangerously smooth. "As I've stated previously, insurance negotiations and internal risk assessments are sensitive, confidential board matters. They are proprietary information." "Proprietary," Liam shot back, emboldened by the collective presence behind him. "It belongs to the homeowners, Ms. Vance. We pay for the insurance. We are the association. We have a right to know the basis for these decisions that dramatically impact our lives and our property values." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her knuckles white where she gripped her pen. "The board," she stated icily, "will not be conducting its sensitive business under duress in a public forum. We stand by our decisions as necessary for the protection of the entire community." The meeting ended soon after, steeped in unresolved tension. Nothing had been conceded, no proof offered, but something had fundamentally shifted. The residents had shown their numbers, their collective voice, and Eleanor Vance, despite her arrogance, had been forced to witness their unified opposition. The battle lines were clearly drawn. The meeting adjourned abruptly after Eleanor Vance's final dismissive statement. A wave of frustrated murmurs swept through the crowded room as people began to gather their belongings, conversations erupting in hushed, angry tones. Liam felt a familiar mix of indignation and disappointment. They had made their voices heard, shown their numbers, but the board, shielded by Eleanor's iron will, hadn't budged an inch. They were no closer to getting the fields or courts reopened. He exchanged a weary glance with Chloe Wexler, who simply gave a tight-lipped shake of her head, acknowledging the stalemate. As Liam turned towards the exit, navigating through clusters of disgruntled neighbors, a hesitant voice called his name, barely audible above the general hubbub. "Mr. Hayes, a moment please." He turned to see Marcus Thorne, the HOA treasurer, hovering nervously near the doorway. Thorne, who had looked deeply uncomfortable throughout the meeting, now seemed even more agitated, darting quick glances around as if afraid of being seen. He beckoned Liam slightly further away from the departing crowd into a small alcove near the clubhouse entrance. "Look," Thorne began, his voice low, and rushed his eyes, avoiding Liam's. I shouldn't be doing this. But what happened in there, the way Eleanor dismissed everyone, it wasn't right." Liam waited, sensing this was more than just an expression of sympathy. Thorne fidgeted, rubbing his hands together. "That whole business about liability insurance, it's not the real story. Not entirely, anyway." "What is the real story, Mr. Thorne?" Liam asked quietly, his senses suddenly on high alert. Thorne took a deep breath, finally meeting Liam's gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and anxiety. "Eleanor. She lives on the corner overlooking the main green near the baseball field. She's been complaining privately for months about the noise." "The noise?" Liam repeated, confused. "Yes," Thorne rushed on, lowering his voice even further. "Kids yelling the crack of the bat, families having picnics, teenagers playing music near the courts in the summer. She hates it, calls it disruptive, says it lowers the tone of the neighborhood, affects property values for the quieter residents. She's been looking for a way to restrict access to make things tidier." Liam stared at him, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity, the sudden liability concerns, the fabricated injuries, the refusal to provide any proof, the sterile landscaping, the aggressive enforcement. It wasn't about insurance premiums or safety risks. It was about one woman's personal vendetta against the sounds of children playing, against the vibrant, active life of the very families Havenwood was supposed to attract. "So, the insurance claims are just an excuse?" Liam asked, his voice dangerously low. "Mostly," Thorne admitted miserably. "There might be a line item increase discussed somewhere, sure, but nothing significant, nothing to justify this." Eleanor latched onto liability as a convenient, hard-to-refute justification to push through what she wanted all along. She and one other board member close to her railroaded the decision. The rest of us, well, we went along, didn't want to make waves. He looked down at his shoes. "I feel complicit." The revelation hit Liam like a physical blow. This entire ordeal, the stress, the frustration, the locked gates, the angry neighbors, it all stemmed from the petty grievances of one powerful, manipulative woman. It wasn't just bureaucratic incompetence, it was a calculated abuse of power, fueled by personal animosity. I have to go," Thorne stammered, already backing away. "Just thought you should know what you're really up against. Be careful, Mr. Hayes. Eleanor doesn't like being challenged." He turned and practically scurried out of the clubhouse, leaving Liam standing alone in the alcove. The weight of the treasurer's confession settling heavily upon him, he now understood the true nature of the fight. It wasn't procedural, it was personal, and far more insidious than he had imagined. The weight of Marcus Thorne's confession settled heavily on Liam. The fight wasn't just against unreasonable rules anymore. It was against deliberate deception, fueled by personal animosity. That evening he called Chloe Wexler and a few of the most engaged neighbors, including Mark and Sarah Peterson, for an urgent, focused meeting at his house. The atmosphere was markedly different from their first gathering. The general outrage had coalesced into a steely determination. Liam carefully recounted his conversation with the conflicted board member, omitting Thorne's name to protect him, but relaying the core message: the liability claims were largely a pretext for Eleanor Vance's personal desire for quiet and control. Hearing it laid bare solidified everyone's resolve. The scattered puzzle pieces now formed a clear, infuriating picture. "So she lied," Mark stated flatly, clenching his jaw. "She stood up in front of all of us and lied." "It appears so," Chloe confirmed, tapping a pen thoughtfully against her notepad. "And if we can prove it, if we can demonstrate that the stated reason for the closures is a fabrication, it significantly weakens the board's position legally and ethically." "How do we prove it?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "Transparency," Chloe replied. "We need the documents they claim justify their actions. The insurance quotes Eleanor mentioned, the risk assessments, any correspondence with legal counsel regarding these supposed liabilities. If those documents don't support their claims, or if they don't exist, their entire justification collapses. Liam looked at Chloe. So, we formally demand those records. Exactly, Chloe affirmed. Under state law, and potentially our own bylaws, homeowners often have the right to inspect certain association records, especially those related to financial matters and decisions impacting common elements. We draft a formal request, citing the relevant statutes. They can't just claim proprietary indefinitely when faced with a proper legal demand. She paused, then added, and while we do that, we should also explore the mechanism for removing board members, the recall. A new energy filled the room. This wasn't just about complaining anymore, it was about strategy. Chloe began outlining the steps for a formal records request, her legal mind dissecting the process with cool precision. She spoke about invoking specific state codes, setting deadlines for compliance, and the potential need for legal action if the board stonewalled. As she spoke, Liam saw her pull out her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as she started roughing out the language for a demand letter. Sharp, precise, and devoid of wiggle room, Liam felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him. He wasn't just a frustrated resident anymore, he was helping coordinate a counteroffensive. He started organizing tasks, who would research the exact bylaw language for recalls, who could help circulate petitions if needed, how they would communicate progress to the wider group of concerned residents. The mood shifted definitively from reactive anger to proactive planning. They had a target, the documents that would expose the lie. They had a potential endgame, removing the board members responsible. Empowered by Chloe's legal expertise and united by the blatant injustice revealed by Thorne's confession, the small group left Liam's house that night, not with frustration, but with a clear plan and a renewed sense of control. The legal gambit was underway. Chloe Wexler's sharply worded demand letter, formally requesting access to the HOA's financial records, insurance policies, and any documentation related to the amenity closures, landed on the board's desk. The initial response was a deafening silence. Days turned into a week, then two. When the HOA management office finally replied, it was with a series of frustrating delays and obfuscations. They needed more time to consult counsel. The records were extensive and required careful collation. Access would be granted, but only during highly restrictive hours at the management office, with no electronic copies permitted. It was clear they were stalling, hoping to frustrate the residents into abandoning their quest. Liam felt his impatience growing, but Chloe remained coolly persistent. Standard tactics, she assured him and the core group of neighbors. They're testing our resolve. She drafted a second letter, this one even more pointed, referencing specific state statutes regarding homeowner access rights and hinting strongly at legal action, including potential personal liability for board members obstructing legitimate requests. The tone shifted from polite demand to unambiguous warning. It worked. Within 48 hours, the management office notified Chloe that a box of relevant documents would be available for inspection. That Friday evening, after putting Noah to bed, Liam headed over to Chloe's house. She had retrieved the box, a standard cardboard file container overflowing with papers, and spread the contents across her dining room table. Invoices, insurance policy documents, thick with legalese, meeting minutes, heavily redacted in places, emails between board members. It was a daunting pile. They brewed coffee, rolled up their sleeves, and began the painstaking process of sifting through the paper trail. Scene cut, parallel action, while Liam and Chloe hunched over the documents under the glow of Chloe's dining room light. Other scenes unfolded across Havenwood, Mark armed with a clipboard and a simple explanation of the board's overreach and lack of transparency. Knocked on doors after dinner. Sarah Peterson spoke earnestly with fellow parents during Saturday morning soccer practice sideline chats. Determined residents working in pairs patiently explained the situation to neighbors, collecting signatures on the official recall petition sheets. Some doors closed quickly, but many more opened, homeowners readily adding their names, their frustration finally finding a constructive outlet. The signature count climbed steadily. Back at Chloe's hours blurred, they meticulously cross-referenced dates, highlighted budget line items, and deciphered complex insurance jargon. They found the sections on the association's general liability policy noting the premium costs. They found emails discussing landscaping changes and security patrols. They found minutes referencing vague resident concerns about noise carefully worded to avoid specifics. What they didn't find was anything remotely resembling a crisis. There were no alarming letters from the insurance carrier threatening cancellation, no significant premium hikes directly tied to field or court usage. No documented legal claims or even formal complaints about injuries that would justify such drastic community-altering actions. Around midnight, elbow-deep in policy riders, Chloe suddenly stopped. "Liam, look at this." She pointed to a clause detailing standard exclusions and coverage limits, and compare it to this email chain from Eleanor. As she pulled up a printed email where Eleanor Vance vaguely mentioned needing to mitigate potential future risks, cited by their broker, the broker's actual recommendation attached here. Chloe found another document, was about adding safety signage and maybe reviewing field scheduling. Standard stuff. Nothing about closures, nothing about certifications. Liam leaned closer, reading the documents side by side. The disconnect was glaring. The narrative Eleanor had presented, of imminent ruinous liability forcing the board's hand, simply wasn't supported by the evidence. It was a pretext. A quiet sense of triumph filled the room, cutting through their fatigue. They had it. The proof wasn't dramatic, no single smoking gun memo, but rather a pattern of exaggeration and misrepresentation woven through the dry documents. Combined with the rapidly growing number of signatures on the recall petitions circulating throughout Havenwood, they finally had the leverage they needed. The truth was unlocked, and the path forward was clear. The day of the special recall election dawned bright, but carried an undercurrent of nervous energy throughout Havenwood. Weeks of determined effort, gathering signatures, sharing information, countering the board's attempts to delay and discredit the recall petition, had culminated in this moment. The community clubhouse, usually a place for quiet meetings or social gatherings, was transformed into an official polling station, manned by impartial volunteers recruited from outside the neighborhood to ensure fairness. Liam walked Noah to the school bus stop, the familiar routine feeling charged with significance. He saw neighbors heading towards the clubhouse, even before work, determined to cast their votes early. There were waves, nods of solidarity, a shared sense of purpose hanging in the crisp morning air. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Had they done enough? Had they convinced enough people that a change was truly necessary? Eleanor Vance and her allies hadn't gone down without a fight, distributing flyers filled with dire warnings about the risks of inexperienced leadership, and defending their actions as fiscally prudent. Throughout the day, a steady stream of residents flowed in and out of the clubhouse. Young parents pushing strollers, retirees who had initially supported the old board, but grew disillusioned by the lack of transparency, working professionals taking time out of their day. The diversity of Havenwood was on full display, united by the desire to have a say in their community's governance. Liam cast his own vote during his lunch break. The simple act of filling in the ballot, feeling surprisingly momentous. He saw Chloe Wexler there, offering a calm, reassuring smile. He saw Mark, giving him a thumbs up. The waiting began. As evening descended, the core group of organizers gathered somewhat spontaneously on Liam's front lawn, pretending to chat casually, while their thoughts were consumed by the impending results. The official count, overseen by the volunteer election monitors, was taking place inside the clubhouse. Every few minutes, someone would check their watch or glance towards the clubhouse. The shared anticipation, a tangible thing. Olivia brought out drinks, trying to ease the tension, but the quiet conversations inevitably circled back to the same questions. Would turnout be high enough? Had they countered the old board's narrative effectively? Finally, just after 8 p.m., one of the designated observers emerged from the clubhouse and walked briskly towards Liam's house. The small group fell silent, all eyes fixed on her approaching figure. She stopped before them, a slight, almost relieved smile touching her lips. "It's official," she announced, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet evening air. The recall measure passed decisively for all 5 board positions. A collective exhale swept through the group, a wave of relief so profound it was almost silent. Then came the cautious questions. "And the replacements?" Liam asked, his voice tight. The slate endorsed by the Havenwood Families for Fairness Group, 1, the observer confirmed, referring to the unofficial name the resident coalition had adopted. 3 parents with young children, 1 retired teacher known for her community involvement, and a property manager with HOA experience, all elected. A quiet cheer went up, quickly stifled, but filled with genuine joy. Mark clapped Liam on the shoulder, hard. Sarah Peterson hugged Olivia. Chloe Wexler allowed herself a broader smile, the professional reserve momentarily slipping. They had done it. The community had spoken, exercising its democratic power to reclaim control from a board that had lost its way. Liam looked around at his neighbors, at the softly lit houses lining the street. A profound sense of relief washing over him, mingled with the unexpected weight of their collective victory. The fight had been long and exhausting, but standing there under the quiet suburban sky, he knew it had been worth it. Havenwood had found its voice again. The change in Havenwood was immediate and palpable, like a black and white photograph suddenly bursting into vibrant color. The very next morning after the election, one of the newly elected board members, a fellow parent Liam knew well, personally went to the baseball field and the tennis courts. With a satisfying clank, the heavy padlocks were cut off and the chains removed. The gates swung open freely. Word spread like wildfire. By afternoon, the familiar joyful sounds Liam had missed so dearly filled the air once more. Children released from the unspoken restrictions swarmed the baseball field, their shouts and laughter echoing across the green. Noah and his friends were out there almost immediately organizing an impromptu game, the crack of the bat reclaiming its rightful place in the Havenwood soundscape. The tennis courts, previously silent and locked, were soon occupied by returning players, the rhythmic thwack thwack, a welcome beat. The first meeting of the new HOA board was held the following week, scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, a time deliberately chosen to allow working residents to attend easily. The atmosphere in the clubhouse meeting room was entirely different, open, collaborative, and focused on transparency. One of their first official announcements was met with surprised applause. After a preliminary review of the previous board's spending, they had identified significant waste on unnecessary security patrols and overpriced contracts. As a result, they were immediately lowering the monthly HOA fees by 25%. The sterile quiet imposed by Eleanor Vance's tenure dissolved, replaced by the vibrant energy of an active, engaged community. Neighbors chatted more freely, kids played with renewed abandon, and the shared spaces felt truly shared once more. Havenwood wasn't just a collection of houses, it was a living, breathing neighborhood. Again, its pulse strong and its spirit restored. The tangible results of their collective struggle were everywhere, a testament to the community reclaiming its values. Several weeks later, Liam was navigating the aisles of the local grocery store on a Saturday morning, enjoying the simple normalcy that had returned to his life and to Havenwood. The stress of the HOA battle had faded, replaced by the familiar rhythms of family and work. As he rounded the corner into the dairy section, he almost collided with a shopping cart, pushed by a figure he instantly recognized, Eleanor Vance. She looked thinner, somehow diminished without the mantle of authority she had worn so rigidly. Her expression, however, was as sour as ever. Recognizing Liam, her eyes narrowed into icy slits. "Mr. Hayes," she greeted him, her voice tight with undisguised resentment. "Enjoying the chaos you've unleashed on our community." Liam paused momentarily, taken aback by her direct bitterness. "Hello, Ms. Vance. I'm enjoying Havenwood. Yes, it's a wonderful community." "Wonderful," she scoffed, glancing around as if ensuring no one else could hear. Though her voice carried, "It's become intolerably noisy. Children screaming on that field, constantly teenagers loitering near the courts. You and your followers have ruined the peace and dignity this neighborhood once had. Property values are bound to suffer." Liam met her gaze calmly, the old flicker of anger replaced by a steady sense of conviction. He wouldn't be drawn into her bitterness. "Havenwood was always intended to be a family community, Ms. Vance," he replied evenly. "People bought homes here because of the amenities, because they wanted their children to play and enjoy the shared spaces. That's what gives it value, life activity, neighbors connecting," he added, unable to resist. "Actually, our realtor mentioned that interest in Havenwood is higher than ever since the facility's fully reopened." Eleanor Vance stared at him, speechless for a moment, her face flushing slightly. It was clear she had expected him to be intimidated or apologetic. Seeing neither, only calm assurance seemed to infuriate her further. She opened her mouth as if to retort, then apparently thought better of it, snapping it shut. Liam simply nodded politely. "Have a good day, Ms. Vance." He maneuvered his cart past hers and continued down the aisle, not looking back. He could feel her glare on his back, but he didn't care. He left her standing alone amidst the brightly lit displays, isolated in her resentment. A ghost of a power that no longer held sway. 6 months later, spring had returned to Havenwood, painting the community in fresh greens and vibrant blossoms. Liam stood near the third base line of the baseball field, effortlessly catching throws from Noah, who was practicing with his team. The air buzzed with the familiar happy sounds, the ping of an aluminum bat connecting the easy laughter of kids, the encouraging calls from other parents lining the field. The tennis courts nearby were alive with players, and the playground echoed with younger children's glee. Liam wasn't just a spectator anymore. He'd volunteered as an assistant coach. As he tossed the ball back to Noah, he caught Chloe Wexler's eye across the field. She was chatting with Sarah Peterson, both watching their kids play. Chloe gave him a small, knowing smile and a nod. It was a brief exchange, acknowledging the journey they'd all undertaken, the battle fought and won. Leaning against the fence, watching his son field a grounder, Liam felt a profound sense of hard-won peace. Havenwood was thriving, more connected and resilient than before. He had changed too, no longer passively accepting, but understanding the value of engagement. Their sanctuary wasn't just found, it had been defended and reclaimed, and now it truly felt like home. Life, like the story of Havenwood, teaches us that complacency can be costly. Ignoring small signs or avoiding engagement in our communities or workplaces can allow unreasonable situations to fester. When things feel wrong, don't passively accept vague explanations. Dare to question and investigate. Like Liam seeking the truth behind the liability claims, arm yourself with facts and understanding. You have more power than you think, but it often requires effort to uncover the real story beneath the surface. Justifications. Crucially, remember, there is immense strength in unity. Facing challenges alone can be daunting, but connecting with others who share your concerns transforms isolated frustration into powerful collective action. Whether tackling an unfair policy or advocating for change, finding your allies and organizing strategically amplifies your voice immensely. Understand the rules governing the situation, the bylaws, the contract at your rights, as knowledge provides leverage. Finally, embrace persistence. Change rarely happens overnight, and pushback is common. Stay the course, follow your strategy, and don't underestimate the impact your determined efforts can have. By applying these lessons, you can navigate challenges more effectively and build a more just and responsive environment around you.